I have very good news for you. God of War Ragnarök supports the PlayStation 5 HDR system level calibration, and I'm very sure the same counts for the PlayStation 4 version as well. On the Xbox Series X, on the other hand, there is literally no support at all. And I apologize for this bad joke, but let's continue. Because this game supports the HDR system level calibration, make sure this is set up in the correct way, otherwise you have a very bad HDR experience in this game. So all what you have to do on supported TVs, make sure you select HGiG and then you increase actually the brightness until you can't see the sun anymore, or the symbol. And on the last page you just decrease the value until there is no sun or object at all. So if you now don't have a TV with HGiG support, then for maximum peak brightness of around 800 candela, count 14 clicks from the very beginning. For a maximum peak brightness of around 1000 candela, count 15 clicks for page number 1 and also page number 2. 15 clicks from the very beginning. Page number 3 on all TVs, absolutely 0. But to make it a little bit easier for you, I made already a video on how to set up HDR on the PlayStation 5 in the correct way. So check this out, link is in the description. So let's talk about the HDR in-game settings in God of War Ragnarök. And yes, we have a couple of, even this game supports the HDR system level calibration. So what we have is the user interface brightness and the HDR brightness. So let's start with user interface. This setting has literally no impact at all in the maximum peak brightness of specular highlights. So you can set up this value as you like it. So let's move on to HDR brightness, and this one is a little bit more tricky. Standard setting or factory setting when you start the game for the very first time is 50, but I found that 50 in combination with HGiG is actually a little bit too dark, especially on the LG CX. On the LG G2, because the TV is in general a little bit brighter, it is actually better, but on the CX I found it with standard setting to 50 and HGiG supported or HGiG enabled too dark. But I have good news for you. If you stay with the setting between 50 and 100, there's literally no difference in the maximum peak brightness from specular highlights. So when we're talking about the maximum peak brightness, okay, other objects of course are getting a little bit darker, of course, depending on the setting. So I would not recommend to actually go below 50, because first of all, I found the picture then way too dark, and you will lose a little bit of maximum peak brightness and specular highlights. But again, between 50 and 100, it is absolutely the same when we're talking about the maximum peak brightness. Again, some objects of course getting darker, but this really depends on the setting. And if you now ask me for a recommendation, then this is actually really hard, because I don't know what TV are you using. I actually tested a lot in terms of HGiG and dynamic tone mapping on, and yeah, as always, it's a very hard decision. So this right now, what you can see here is my LG CX, and the reason why I'm using my LG CX and not the G2 is actually because I like this menu, how it is displayed much better, to be very honest. So that's the only reason. Picture quality is still superb even after my latest update, okay, 044020 I think was the latest. Anyway, and what I don't like right now, this is right now with HDR brightness setting 50, so that means the standard settings, but I personally I found it really a little bit too dark. So when we're now talking about this level here, and we have actually we're expecting a very bright picture actually, because the sun, and it's a bright day, but HGiG, there is something missing. As always, this is the problem with the LG CX, because the maximum peak brightness is a little bit limited, let's say like this, compared to G2 or other TVs, and therefore HGiG is always a little bit too dark. There's something missing, there's the punch missing. So I found actually myself that even this game supports the HGiG, the HDR system level calibration, that I switched to dynamic tone mapping on very often to play this game, because you can see actually you get a lot of punch back, you get a lot of vibrant colors. Yeah, okay, I wouldn't say the colors are changing too much, but especially the brightness, of course, is a big difference. And yeah, it's at the end absolutely up to you what you like to do. If you like to play dynamic tone mapping on or HGiG, but again with the standard settings, brightness 50, in-game settings, I found it just too dark. And this, what you can see here right now, is HGiG, CX and brightness set to 100 in the game. And it does look much better. The problem now is with brightness set to 100, some specular highlights you will start lose very fine details, but actually it's not very, it's just subtle actually. Not a big problem in my opinion, but I like this now much better. But the problem is, of course, I haven't played the whole game. So brightness setting 100 in a game doesn't sound right at all, but give it a try, because again, you can change the brightness setting between 50 and 100 without changing maximum peak brightness on specular highlights. So this game still just uses right now 800 candela maximum peak brightness. Doesn't matter if it's set to 50 the brightness in the game or 100, it really doesn't matter. But again, right now HGiG and brightness setting 100, I just like it. On the other hand, right now dynamic tone mapping on, of course, would now just terrible over brighten the picture in my opinion, and that's way too much. But for HGiG, brightness setting 100 or at least close to 80, give it a try. Put in the comment section what you think. My LG G2 is a little bit brighter than the LG CX, but it's actually not like day and night, just a couple of hundred of candelas. And yeah, that's HGiG at the moment with brightness setting 50, and I still think it is not enough to actually have the impression to have a very bright day. Again, it is better compared to the CX because average picture brightness and the specular highlights, of course, are a little bit brighter. Almost 1000 candela compared to 750 candela, let's say like this, or actually below 700 candela when we measuring the real brightness, and this actually almost 1000 candela after calibration. So it is a little bit brighter, but really not like day and night. And even with the standard setting in terms of brightness in the game, I found dynamic tone mapping on is just giving you a much better impression, actually a much better picture in terms of brightness, in terms of the wow effect. Okay, so I found here as well dynamic tone mapping on is doing a great job with standard setting 50, but if you like to use HGiG, which I would recommend to have the most accurate HDR picture, then in my opinion you would need to increase the in-game brightness. And I'm very happy that God of War Ragnarök supports the HDR system level calibration on the PlayStation console. And again, I apologize for the Xbox Series choke, but I really do like HDR in this game much better than in God of War on the PlayStation 4, because in God of War PlayStation 4 we had a lot of clipping details in specular highlights, so this is completely gone. I really do like the HDR implementation compared to God of War on the PlayStation 4. It is, I wouldn't say day and night, but it is so much better. Superb contrast in my opinion, and colors are great, and yeah, that's all what I have to say. If you now like to play this game with HGiG or dynamic tone mapping on or any other mode, it's really up to you. But keep in mind, just HGiG actually gives you the most accurate HDR experience. That's from my end. From my side, I have to continue playing this game. So far, story-wise, this is actually really cool. And yeah, put in the comment section what you think about the game. If you like my recommendation in terms of HDR, but again, there's not much to recommend because this game supports the HDR system level calibration, which is great. And I hope we will see more great HDR implementation like that. Thank you.